I'll give you a little context on where I'm coming from. So Turner has been more by, I'd say, by accident than design. I hate to admit, a leader in the use of BIM. We started 6-7 years ago on the west coast of the U.S. Hospital projects in particular. It was a new technology. We saw the designers starting to model. We said, well, how can we take advantage of it? And as innovation typically happens, it was very grassroots, just people trying it out on projects. And then it was recognized probably about 5-6 years ago as really game-changing or potentially having the potential for game-changing impact on the company. So I was, by coincidence, in between some assignments and was very interested in BIM and what I saw, so I jumped in, started taking on some responsibilities in our New York office and then nationally. And in that time, we've had a tremendous amount of growth in the adoption of BIM. And what's interesting about this, and I don't point this out to boast necessarily, but to highlight that this our growth, up to over 600 projects now, or 40+ billion of work that's either completed or ongoing, was all happening without any sort of a mandate. We've never mandated that you must use BIM. It was and continues to be very grassroots. If its value is proven, then people will use it, and that value has been proven time and again. But what's interesting is that where we are now is more, we're getting to that point where we've sort of saturated the basics, and now we're looking forward and how do we advance. And so I want to talk quite a bit about that. So again, that history is all well known to you, but for us it was an interesting thing because I think BIM in particular, for an industry that is very focused or very sort of locked into tradition and the way of doing things, same way for years and years, BIM really sort of woke people up and said, wow, there are better ways. We can do things with new technologies and get better results. And so it really was an eye-opener, and sort of a door opener for a lot of people in the company. And that's led to quite a an interest in its broad application, and as well as related technologies. It's almost this sort of tsunami of technology that's flooding us now, that everybody's sort of looking around saying, what other tools can we use? And so what we see is clearly that there are, as everyone here knows, there's many uses for BIM. What I think we've I think hit most of the basic ones for our company, the trade coordination. This is actually an example. I went back a little bit in time, but this is one of the first big ones for us, probably 4 or 5 years ago, which was Yankee Stadium, the new Yankee Stadium, and that was the first large project that we'd ever applied BIM for coordination in particular. Really changed the marketplace in New York City because we were able to really leverage a job of that size and that sort of signature nature of being $1.2 billion. To really change the marketplace, and so that was a real start for us as a company, and then we've again continued to refine that and develop metrics and such around coordination. Then migrated sort of naturally into scheduling, and this is an example of a recent one for a job in Kuala Lumpur. It's a 118-story tower that we modeled all the site work, all the sort of the logistics of the construction and the sequence as well, and it was a fairly extensive effort because we actually got a model out of an architect in Australia, which was in ArchiCAD, and so we sort of struggled with that a little bit because that's not as common, but subsequently built this very detailed schedule, and so that's fairly bread and butter. At least that's basic sequencing. Same thing with logistics and safety planning. This example in New York City of one of our projects, which is the New York University Medical Center, the Langone development. I think it's running now about a $2 billion redevelopment on the east side of Manhattan. Very extensive, very difficult conditions, so everything's modeled to a high level of detail for logistics. And actually, we also worked with the City of New York on developing BIM-based submission plans for their site safety review. Prior to this, they'd mostly been working in 2D, and then, in fact, actually, one of the gentlemen who's going to talk tomorrow, Tyler Goss, was instrumental in that effort, working with the City of New York and the Department of Buildings, and coming up with this BIM-based plan. So it was a pretty intensive effort, but again, that logistics and safety planning is pretty standard. Estimating we've started branching out over the years. Now starting to tackle, okay, how do you really integrate BIM into the estimating process? And we've had sort of fits and starts. I have a fairly high standard for BIM for estimating, which is that it's truly integrated as part of the process, that the estimators are using the model, they're extracting the quantities in an organized way. We haven't fully integrated this yet into the estimating process. It's a bit of a struggle. And then the other push, so we went upstream, now we're going downstream, is also working on a solution for facilities management. This is an example of a software that we actually worked with a third party in guiding the development. So it's taking the model and it's linking all the documentation to the model, but also we sort of achieved what I call the holy grail of BIM, which is linking into the sensor data. So we got a server and connected into the actual control system through a BACnet protocol, and we're streaming all the sensor data out and linked into the model. So you can click on an object and see, whatever the temperature, humidity of that piece of equipment or the room or what have you. So it's a pretty amazing, pretty advanced solution. But what's interesting is there's a lot of things you can do, but the challenge is, sort of guiding it, providing direction. Otherwise, you risk, this effect of, this out of control. You're innovating for innovation's sake, or you're changing for change's sake, but to what end? And it actually can be quite dangerous if you start running around saying, "Oh, look at all the things I can do with BIM." It can cause trouble. So, what I wanted to talk about today was this sort of framework, and it's purely my perspective on this, based on having lived through this growth of BIM, and also I'm responsible for lean implementation and IPD, project alliancing type agreements. And what's become clear is you really have to. There's multiple elements to the successful sort of capitalizing and leveraging on these innovations like BIM, which are really focusing on people, the process, and the purpose why you're doing this. The key, I think, is when you're talking about people, is to realize you have all those uses of BIM, 3D, 4D, 5D, which are they're nouns, right? They're things, versus using BIM as a verb and for action, to do something to get a result, and to try to get to a goal that you're trying to accomplish. It's an action tool, and otherwise you risk this issue where sort of the what do they call it, the law of the instrument, that if you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. BIM, I notice that a lot with BIM. We get trapped in that this idea. Well, we got this solution, and it's looking for a problem. Let's go try to apply it to something. Versus the other way around. Flip it around. What's the problem? What are we trying to solve? What are the struggles? What are the struggles that everybody's dealing with every day? What are the pain points? What are the problems? What are the things we want to improve? How do we help people get their job done better? And you go back to that example of facilities management. It's a classic. We that solution I showed you, we deployed it up at. I'm debating whether I should tell you the name of at a large educational institution in Manhattan. We actually delivered that solution. They installed it on 10 different machines for the facilities managers, and that was about a year and a half ago. I think since then we maybe had one person look at it. The facilities guys, we said, oh, well, it's their fault, right? It's them. It's not us. It's a beautiful solution. It's got all the information in the model. It's got all linked. It's got all the sensor data. Who wouldn't want that? It's beautiful. But you think about that guy who gets up every day. The facilities guy gets up in the morning. He goes to work. He's got two things to do. He's either fixing something or he's maintaining something. And so when he goes out and changes that filter, how does that help him do that better? It doesn't. And he's keeping track of maintenance information, probably doing it on an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, our CIO once told me this, and this I've never forgotten it because it's so true. Every solution always competes with Excel. It's true. Anything, because that's the easiest, quickest tool, and that's what people tend to use, and they default to that. So, when we're looking at these solutions, again, when we're thinking about it from, this seems logical, why wouldn't they want this? You got to flip it around and start thinking from that people perspective. Well, what are they doing every day? How are they doing it? Where are they struggling? How do you help them do their job better? And then instead of a push, I got a solution looking for a problem, it's a pull. Here's the problem. Now let's go get the solution for it. And then you get this whole life cycle and all these parties to this process that we need to really start to drill down more around the people and the jobs they're doing every day. And then the only other overlay I would add to it is this idea of, at some point you have to recognize that there is so much that you can do with BIM to levels of detail that are as much as you want, cove basing, door hardware, whatever. But there's with anything there's trade-offs. Life is we're not blessed with infinite resources. We have to have trade-offs. So given the cost or the effort, is the return there? So you have to overlay that as well when we're looking at, okay, what problems are we solving? What are we trying to do, and how are we trying to do it? So I'll give you some examples of those sort of the very more targeted use of BIM for problem solving. And what I also want to highlight is also the tools that we're using, because again, they're not the same for every solution. We sort of an unofficial policy of trying not to be very ideological or dogmatic about software. Use the best tool for the task at hand. That's it. Find, and whatever that tool is, use it. Here's a perfect example: World Trade Center Transportation Hub. It's it's running probably around a $4 billion project, maybe $5, and we may never know for the next 10 years what the final cost is going to be, but it just keeps going. So in everyone's defense, it's a tough site to build. So the Transportation Hub sits right at the middle in the World Trade Center site. Every project that is there connects into the hub. And then you got the path, the train coming in, the subway coming in. And so it's a very complex site, very complex project, and it's very complex design, this Santiago Calatrava design. What's interesting is we were engaged on that project probably 3-4 years ago. We immediately, or almost immediately, put a BIM person down there full time. So we started trying to play with, okay, we got Calatrava's design in 2D, which is fine, but so we had to immediately wanted to convert that to 3D, and we had to find the best tool for that. We played with ArchiCAD, we played with Revit, even Bentley, and all sorts of different tools. We ended up with SketchUp. Amazing enough, we ended up with SketchUp. And I've mentioned that to people, and there's some folks who, very sort of rigid orthodoxy around this, and they say, well, that doesn't count. It's not BIM, and that, to me, that's again that narrow definition of a software versus BIM is a problem-solving tool. And a verb, it's an action you're taking to do something better. And so this helps us do this better. We were doing hundreds of little models every day. A superintendent would come over and say, I don't understand. What am I doing over here tomorrow or today? Where's that crane going to go? How do I connect, and how am I coordinating with the work that's adjacent? They had to figure these things out every single day. The fastest tool, quickest, easiest tool we could use was SketchUp, and it was tremendously helpful and useful. And we had at least two people full-time down there through, I think it was last year, and then it started tapering off a little bit. Here's another example of a use of a very targeted use. It's sort of an interesting one. Fairly recent, we have this large project, the Wilshire Grand Hotel in Los Angeles, and they have a huge mat slab, and so they wanted to use this as an opportunity to beat the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest mat slab pour. And so they did something very interesting. They modeled everything they could imagine that was going to go into that job. They first laser scanned the hole, then they modeled the rebar. There's a cooling system to keep the concrete down, the temperature down, all the little steel shoring, even the shoring. I mean, everything was modeled, and then they placed the concrete, and then they deducted for all those things that were modeled, so that they get an accurate count or an accurate volume of the actually I'll go back of the concrete. So what's interesting is that it was I'll have to try to think if I can do the math of the cubic meters, but it was the target. I'll give it in cubic yards at least. The target was the Guinness Book of World Records was 21,000 cubic yards of concrete was the previous record. We modeled everything. We came up with the quantity that we'd need would be 21,240 cubic yards, and then the actual concrete that was poured was 21,200. So we had a difference of what was modeled and estimated of 21,240 versus 21,200. So it was a difference of 0.2% from the actual to the estimate. I mean, unbelievably accurate. And though it was for a purpose that you wouldn't expect, this sort of recognition in the Guinness Book of World Records, what you also start to see with this is, given that, how do you, how do you capitalize on this for a business purpose, this accuracy? And so it starts to get also our people thinking more about the trusting in the product. So here's another example of just simple things that we're doing, again, to make it easier and solve simple problems. Estimators, like 5D estimating, we could take quantities off of a Revit model all day long, but I don't really hold that as our standard. Our standard is, again, integrating it with the estimating process. So average estimators are using the tools and taking advantage of models. So the simplest on-ramp is like a SketchUp. So we built a little plugin, in-house plugin for SketchUp, where you can use material properties and then use that to organize all your quantities. And very basic, and you'd say, oh, it's sort of childish. I mean, there's much more sophisticated solutions out there, and we know that. We've used pretty much all of them. We own them all, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, you got to think about that estimator, that I don't know, 50-year-old estimator, senior estimator, has been doing it his whole life, same way, hand takeoffs. To give him, the Ferrari of BIM estimating, he'll never get out of the driveway, so why even try, So we give him a little simple thing. Hey, how about SketchUp, and you get some basic quantities for your massing and generating something. And that's easy, it's approachable. It's not anxiety-inducing. They have to figure out all this new software. It's basic. Same thing with, when you start to escalate that a little bit, another plugin that we developed in-house, which is just getting your quantity, sort of a bi-directional quantities out and then back into Revit or Navisworks via Excel. Again, why fight the Excel bias? Use it, take advantage of it. Let them work in Excel, but then go back and forth with the quantities and organize in a way that they can use them. Oh, there's the Wilshire out of sequence. So here's another example of the use of the BIM for a very specific purpose, which is an office tower in New York. It's the 7 Bryant Park. This one very specifically was around, it was a thick concrete core going up through the building. They had a lot of penetrations, and when we got the design models, I hate to say it, but they weren't fully coordinated with the shear wall, and so we ended up going back in, making sure that all the penetrations were coordinated. We found a lot of issues that we wouldn't have otherwise caught if not for BIM, and so there's a projected savings, just sort of cost avoidance at the first pass is $328,000, but that's only for a limited area of the building. We actually then subsequently went through the rest of the building and found more issues. So, it's probably $500,000, $600,000 just in that special study that we did alone with coordinating the shear wall penetrations. Another example of a project, big stadium project in San Francisco, where we had the coordinating utilities with foundations, 9,200 meters of plumbing pipe and 69,000 meters of electrical conduit, and we had to coordinate that with 3,000 piles that were being drilled. So, very specialized use of BIM, because that was a problem that the project manager, project superintendents were grappling with. Is not just the coordination, but the sequence as well, because they had all this work, the utilities sort of weaving in and out of the piles. And then again, another example of that specialized use, using a software, Celebri, where we built as an effort on behalf of an architect, actually in California. We took their model and ran it through a code checking exercise using Celebri, with building a bunch of converting the building code or the what they call OSHPOD code into rules, and then running them through the model so that you could see where things are out of compliance. So the image at the bottom is the turn radius of a wheelchair in a bathroom. So there's a certain radius you have to have. We had a model that had all the fixtures in the space, and we run a rule and say, can a wheelchair turn in that space? If it can't, we got to redesign that bathroom. And so we flagged all those places in the model that were out of compliance. And it was interesting because we did that on behalf of the architect. Normally, this isn't a place that we would sort of play because it's more on the design side, but it was a need. The requirements in California are very, very stringent. When you submit, if it's not right, it gets rejected, and you have to start the process all over again. So we wanted to get it right the first time. So we extended that then next to this effort to try to take a lot of our safety rules and automate those as well. So again, if you got a model and you've got the safety managers have all this sort of knowledge in their head about what they're looking at when they're walking a job. Well, in reality, what's in their head, it can be converted into a rule. if this condition, then this. It's simple sort of conditional statements. So you set up a rule, and then you run it through, again, Solibri, and it kicks out results. So for instance, this is an example of where it's highlighting the slab opening. So you got a perimeter protection. So we're flagging ahead of time to the safety people as well as our staff. Look, these areas you're going to have to plan for. You have to buy the protection from the trades or provide it ourselves. And it's just an automated process. This one's checking distances of fire extinguishers, because in New York, this is New York City in particular, has some strict requirements. So again, the idea is, how do we leverage BIM? None of that sort of fits into a nice, neat category, 4D, 5D, whatever. It's more about using it to help people do their jobs better, free people up from the tasks that aren't real value add, and so they can focus on delivering greater value to our clients and to our own staff. So it's a very conscious effort on our part to look at BIM in a very different way. What's interesting, though, with all that being said, right? It sounds so simple. Well, we just help you. We go around and we say, hey, we're going to help you do your job better. Well, it still doesn't mean we don't get stiff-armed quite a bit, because it's an interesting thing that people are. If it weren't for people, everything would be so easy. So I'm going to do an exercise. Who has pen and paper? How many people have pen and paper? Few? Good. Okay, so for the ones that do, and even the ones that don't, you can still follow along on this one and try to imagine it. So I'm going to do a little exercise. So I want you to write the words Turner Construction Company. Just write it in 2 seconds. And when you're done writing it, I want you to tell me when you're done. Raise your hand. Whoever's got the pen and paper, everybody write out, and then raise your hand. I want to take an average count of how long it takes you to do that. You're already done? Well, that's fast. Okay. So I didn't even, you need my watch. So 5, 6 seconds. So flip your paper over so that you're not looking at it again. And when I tell you to go, do it again, and then raise your hand. So hold on. Everybody flip your paper over so you can't see what you wrote. So write it again. Turner Construction Company. So, okay, 7, 8 seconds, something like that. Okay, flip your paper over. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to make everything so much easier for you. We're going to half the effort, right? Half the effort. So I want you to write, when I say go, I want you to write Turner Construction Company, but every other letter. Every other letter. So ready? Go. And think about, as you're doing that, try to think about what you're sort of feeling as you're going through that. Much more diversity of results here. Okay, so it's 18, 19 seconds. So you can run this scenario forever, but what's interesting, right? I did this myself. You can try it again. Try it if you want to. It's fascinating because this is what I did. This once I was on a plane, and this is what I do on planes. The people next to me are like, what is this nut job doing? So, I timed myself, did the same thing, ran it out. Okay, do it first time, Turner Construction Company, run it out. But, you'd see that blue line, that's the original. Okay, fine, gets a little bit better, but not dramatic improvement. The green line is then, every other letter. Okay, it sounds so simple. Well, I'm just going to have you do it a different way, and it's half the effort. But what happens is, as everybody who just did that, you'll probably notice that you're well, at least for me, my brain was hurting. It literally hurts, right? You literally have to think about it. And you're like, what? But what's interesting is, okay, yeah, it's harder, but then it gets better, and then eventually it gets better than, you're faster than even when you first did it. Eventually you get, you really just burn it into your brain. What's interesting is, and I mention this because it speaks to an issue that sort of holds us back, which is just behavior change. And we tend to blame people. I know, I hate to use New York is an example, but it's always a good punching bag. It's a tough market in New York, and the construction industry is a little rough. And the politest way to describe it is very traditional. Doesn't like to change much. And often we get into this. I see our folks that get into this mindset that, well, it's just because everybody's a knucklehead and they don't get what we're trying to get them to do and why it's better and blah, blah. But in reality, what we have to recognize is that, in fact, it's not necessarily that people are knuckleheads, although there are a fair number of those too. More so, it's that we're literally biologically designed to not change. Our brain uses, I think it's like 20% of our, makes up, it takes up 20% of our calories in any given day, but it makes up whatever, 5% of our body mass. I mean, we have a ton of energy that brain uses to think. And it's evolved to see patterns, lock down patterns, and just stick to those and not have to keep thinking about new ways of doing things. So it wants to do things the same way. That's the evolutionary advantage of not having to consume more energy in thinking. So the synapses get hardwired and to do a certain way. And when you do something new, you have to break those connections, and it takes time, and it takes practice. That's that whole curve, when that green line of, okay, it took me 7, 8 times, then I got better, because I'm literally rewiring my brain to do things differently. And so I mentioned this. It seems, it's not, that's certainly not a sexy BIM image, but I mentioned it because it's so critical to the adoption of any innovation is the recognition of the people who are having to live through that change. It is disruptive. My good example is we've got new phones in our office, and for years the mute button was on the right, and the speaker button for hanging up was on the left. It switched. The new phone switched. Right, simple thing. To this day, it's been probably 3 months. Every time when I'm on mute, and I quickly, when I'm not thinking, and I go to hit the button, so I want to talk because I'm on mute, I hang up because I'm hitting the wrong button. I keep hitting, it's on the wrong side, and I keep hanging, and it's always a kicker because it's at the moment when I actually do want to talk, I hang up. I'm like, oh, I think they did that deliberately. So but it's interesting, right? Simple thing, little buttons change, but my brain is so wired to the way it was always done that it's hard to change that, and it takes practice. So what the next element that I want to talk about is then, creating a process to make and sustain change. Because again, all things being equal, habit kicks in. People want to do things the same way. How do you keep advancing? How do you improve and innovate over time? And so I'm sure you've probably seen this embarrassing slide that we often show in the U.S. I'm sure this is nothing like this in Australia. It's that productivity trends in construction in that red line that are flat lined for 40 years. We've not increased our productivity. All other industries are on that blue line, almost doubled productivity. So, it is an embarrassing thing, but it's interesting. We see that a lot, and there's a lot of reasons that you could attribute to that flat line. Here's my take on it. So, again, actually, when I think about it, I was on a plane again when I did this. I get my best work done on planes. This is a little Excel spreadsheet and a chart I created once, because I had this theory. I said, well, what if that flat line is really a function of this failure to learn? Failure to establish sort of those baselines, improve upon those, and build on them. So that compounding effect of continuous improvement. So what you see really quickly there on the left-hand side is this sort of the year 0 to 40. The first column is not learning. So it's sort of a random thing, and the baseline being 100. 1 year we improve to 1%, but then the next year we go back 2%. Next year is 5% plus, and then next year is -3. Sort of bum, I bounce around. The column next to that is, well, what if like putting $1 in the bank? The next year it's $1.10, and then interest on top of that becomes $1.15. Interest on top of that becomes $1.25. Interest. So the key being, every year I don't take the money out of the bank. I keep it there. I lock it in. That becomes the new baseline. I build on that. I build on that. I build on that. Well, that's the red line. It's the compounding effect. That if I can establish that every year, that lock in the improvement and then build on that, you get this dramatic increase. By the end of year 40, it's a 700% increase from the base year. So to me, it's our, there's a root cause here is our inability to, or a lack of sort of that process for improving, for establishing the simple cause and effect. which is, I often joke that it feels sometimes like we operate as an industry, and it's like Victorian era medicine with leeches and vapors and stuff. We do things and we don't really know what made things better. So we just keep doing all of it, hoping that somewhere in there's something that did make things better. What we're trying to get to more, and I see the need for it more and more, is this much more scientific approach that it's like my third grade son was learning this, right? Scientific method. You have a hypothesis, you test your hypothesis, you check your results. If the results don't match, you go back and you adjust your hypothesis and you start that process over. In the lean world, it's called PDCA or PDSA, plan, do, study, adjust, or act. But all it is really simple, is really looking for the cause and effect. I do this, did I get a better result? If I didn't, then I go back and I check and I adjust what I thought. And BIM and just generally technology and innovation is very difficult to discern its impact if you don't have a very systematic, methodical way of applying it. And we try to do that as much as we can, I know, in-house, and we don't do it nearly as much as I'd like, where we're trying those different tools, we're applying them in very specific ways, saying, okay, what is that? What do we think we're going to see when we use BIM for this purpose? Did we see that result? So we can start to say, yeah, you know what, that's good. Let's make that the standard, then let's move forward. And so what we're trying to get to is this idea of, again, this PDCA cycle, this continuous improvement, where you make something better, you prove that it's better, you lock it in, that becomes the standard, that wedge on the graphic, and then you innovate to find new ways to improve that. So you're not done, you're never done. You just keep trying to get better and better. And my mantra is better before perfect. It's a sort of a derivation of the, don't let the perfect be the enemy, good enough. It's too easy to imagine, especially I've noticed with technology in particular, because we get so wrapped up in technology, always looking for that silver bullet, that panacea, that perfect thing is going to be right around the corner. Let's just wait. It never comes. It's not about the technology. It's about the people. It's about the process. You make those better, and then you find the solution that supports that. And so you also have to have this methodical way of approaching it, so that every year you're getting a little bit better, and you know that you're getting better. So I'll click through, because again, process is not an easy one to show. So I will show more results though, and this is a little bit of almost a bit of a chronological order. In some of the early BIM jobs, that BIM and some some aspects of continuous improvement being applied to the project as well, and the results that we got. So this job is in Nintendo headquarters 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, that we completed it. Really maxed out on BIM. You can see there's a crane optimization study, a lot of prefab, a lot of modular, lots of just-in-time deliveries, that sort of thing. Where we accelerated the schedule 3 months, less labor on site, dramatically less labor on site, more because it was being pushed, a lot of off-site. Productivity was dramatically higher, and we returned 7% of a $200 million budget was returned to the owner as savings. I mean, really quite dramatic. I remember this was the eye-opener job for me when I visited. I'm like, wow. And you can start to see that recipe. All of a sudden, it's not like random. Oh, we're doing a bunch of these things. It's like, okay, you do these things, you get results. And then what was interesting to watch as I saw other jobs coming online is that same sort of recipe, not just BIM, but it's BIM in this continuous improvement framework, this process of improvement, and then for great results. Again, Middle Tennessee Medical Center, probably 3-4 years ago, $3 million the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, was significantly below the owner's budget. We returned $4 million in savings. Again, on-site labor savings, ahead of schedule. One of the first times we started seeing electrical prefab, that was always one of those trades that I wondered, how do they take advantage of it? But you can see in this case, they were doing a lot of prefab of their conduit and junction boxes off-site, palletizing them, shipping them. They saved, again, 42% labor savings for them. First example I've seen at that time was of the trades working on top of the deck, using total stations, taking the points off their model, laying out the hangers ahead of time from on top of the deck, drilling down and then dropping them, then pouring the deck. Much safer, much more productive. With BIM, you have this accuracy, and then you have the labor savings that's the result. So you could clearly see BIM, again, enabling a better process, a better way of doing their job, and a safer way of doing the job, and getting better results. Another University of Kentucky. This was an interesting one because, again, from an electrician standpoint, that picture in the lower left, so this is this electrician who probably had like a $25 million electrical package. It was about a $250 million project. Never had a conduit bender on site the whole time. Never once. They bent every piece of their conduit was bent off site in their shop, and it was all shipped in. Never larger than a shipment that exceeded the size of that trailer in the back of his pickup truck. So he had a $25 million package. Everything was delivered to the site from that back of that little pickup truck. So it was all these little, again, this concept of small batches, flow, just trying to, just in time, just get the materials there, only the materials we need when we need them. Owensboro is, again, it was a few years, probably 2 or 3 years ago, another example of that sort of maximizing the enabling technology of BIM for improving how people are doing things. Prefabricated head walls and the panelized exterior wall is that's not as unusual. But then the mechanical contractor doing this sort of kit of parts type approach, putting all his ductwork bagged and put it into a container that gets shipped to the site and then just gets rolled. Everything on wheels, everything just rolled onto the job. Another example of that, but about the same time. But what was interesting, I wanted to highlight this one because not just the head walls and then the bathroom pods, which those never really those are interesting. Everybody gets all excited about bathroom pods. I don't know why, but it's interesting. But I thought the more sort of revolutionary aspect of this job was the prefabricated corridor racks, these modular racks, right? So we had all the trades, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection to an extent, in a warehouse off-site, in a factory-like environment, all working together, building those multi-trade racks in a unistrut system. And it was one of the first times we had done that on this project. What was interesting was that some of the team members from that project went then to this job, which is happening right now, which is down at, oh, you have sound too. This makes it so much more exciting when you can hear the guy jacking up the duct. So what it is it's a Sibley Hospital, and I guess I shouldn't have named them, right? Sibley Hospital in Washington. And so the team from Ohio who had done this rack system then helped out our Washington office. So this was a lump sum bid, $80 million job. We incorporated this scheme, and we pre-picked the subcontractors, the MEP subs. We came up with this idea, okay, we're going to use this multi-trade rack system in the corridors. And there's, I want to say, 140 modules. They're about 20 foot long, seven floors of the building. There's 20-foot long sections, I think 7, I forgot how many, you have to do the math, I guess. 7 per floor that get built. They were all built off-site. So while we were doing excavation and foundations, they were building the MEP systems for the corridor. And so the minute that the space was ready, they were ready to ship these racks in modular form. The thing that was interesting was lump sum bid. We planned for this, and we planned for the schedule savings. So it was probably 2 or 3 months of a schedule saving, and then there was a cost savings that we assumed as well, $2 to $3 million. We put that in our bid, so we accounted for that, and we won the job because of it. And now we're actually delivering it. Thank God. It actually turns out to be possible, and so we are actually delivering this, and seems fine. It's going in right now. In fact, they're installing all those. So I mention that because this is a key sort of turning point. It's now leveraging this for a competitive advantage. Now taking all these, we've got sort of the people part we're addressing, the process. Now we're saying, look, how does this apply both internally and externally to our clients? How do we win work with this? How do we sort of monetize it, if you will? So I want to end with this section on purpose. Why we're doing this, because again, I think that's critical. There's a direction, there's a vision behind this. It is trying to become a strategy. I want you to pay attention to this video, if you could, because I want to talk to you about this in a minute. So I was actually making that video one night, and my wife saw it, and she goes, "You're not going to really show that cheetah killing a cute bunny rabbit." I said, "That's the best part." Like, no, absolutely. So what's interesting, right? When I was a kid, I was absolutely fascinated with cheetahs. To this day, it's one of my favorite animals. And I saw a study that came out last year that absolutely was fascinating for me, because and it speaks to sort of our purpose and why we're doing what we're doing. The cheetah is interesting, right? It's we always think about it as this. It's fast, right? Fastest land animal, 65 miles an hour. There was a team of scientists who tagged a cheetah with GPS accelerometers, and I don't even want to ask how they got them on them, but they got them on them, and they attracted some cheetahs hunting. And what was fascinating was it wasn't the speed which made them successful. But even more interesting, cheetahs also decelerate faster than they accelerate. They slow down quickly. They also are perfectly adapted that their paws. You saw that maybe saw in the video that they're the only cat that actually extends its claws when it runs. And so what it allows it to do is grip the ground and turn. Same thing with its bone structure is evolved to be strong to take that impact of the deceleration and the turning. And so it's an interesting thing, because again, the cheetah its success is its ability to pivot, its ability to change. It's perfectly adapted to that. And you notice when it's chasing that rabbit, right? It's always aligned with it. It's perfectly in alignment. It's always watching it, right? It's trying to keep track of it, and so it's got that sort of laser focus. So and I think that I use that as a metaphor for what we're trying to do. It's not about it's not for us about it's not about being fast or cheap. It's about staying close to our customers. That maximum agility to react to what a customer values and deliver that value in the most sort of streamlined, effective way possible. And I always use this quote from Peter Drucker, because I think it distills the essence of what a company is about. The purpose of your company is to capture and keep customers. Everything thereafter is meant to get you there. So when I look at BIM, I look, or even also at Lean and other things, it's all in that context of how does this help me be more agile? How does it help me stay close to the client, deliver value, and be effective? There's times I look at that video sometimes, and I also have this sometimes I have a reaction, like I start to feel like I'm the rabbit, because some days, certainly when you're on a job site, sometimes you always feel like you're being chased versus chasing. And so it's also a metaphor for sort of what do you want to be? Do you want to be that forward-thinking, agile firm that is way out ahead of your competition and playing to win, or are you the rabbit that's just playing not to lose? And if you want to win, then what you have to do is you have to start looking at again the tools, the innovations, the process, the people as a framework for how you're going to achieve those results that you're trying to get to, and what you identified. So again, I'll close with that reminder: this framework, this P3 type framework, right? The people, process, and purpose. When those are working, when they're in sync, there's amazing results that you can achieve, and I think there's huge opportunities for any firm that's again playing to win, that's out in front and willing to be a leader. So I'll end on that. Thank you.